Math is all around us. We don't even notice it. While some of this math requires us to use the skills we've learned in school, there's so much more that we take for granted. My objective as a math sleuth is to show you math concepts being used every day. It could be simple or complex math. Let's take a look at music. Let's see what I've uncovered, which may generate more questions than answers, but which serves my purpose of getting you thinking. Counting, rhythm, scales, intervals, patterns, symbols, harmonies, time signatures, tone, pitch. The notations of composers and sounds made by musicians are connected to mathematics. Often in movies, the music enhances the emotions of the scene. With Steamboat Willie, we have a happy, relaxed feeling.
Shut off that engine.
Listen to the music in the background. The music enhances this thriller. Can you tell what movie it's from? I'm sure you guessed it. Jaws.
Who do I speak to about getting Hillary?
You can feel your emotions change as we jump to an emotionally sad scene from the movie Beaches.
We can let her go. I have to talk to the doctor in charge. That's really
It must have been cold there in my shadow.
Did your heart jump? You can feel it with the music that's being played. This is a scene from Poltergeist. While music can make you feel different emotions, it can also affect you physically, where you may want to tap your toes to the beat or even dance. We see math and dance, following dance steps, as you see in the movie Dirty Dancing.
2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, don't lean back, lifting up, 2, 3, 4, shoulders down, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Again, concentrate.
While our dance lessons may not be similar to that of Dirty Dancing, you may have participated in dance classes in or out of school like this group. Can you believe that the man in the front row is 70 years old?
See you looking lovely. I hope you're taking lovely. 'Cause all I want is having you and don't need nothing more.
You can hear the beat of a song. It has a rhythm, a systematic arrangement of pattern. To help maintain this pattern, musicians often use a metronome, where the clicks keep a regular, repeated pattern known as beats per minute. Here are some examples of the same piece of music being played at different beats per minute. Looking at music from a different perspective, I wanted to know more about the instruments and if math is still involved before music is made. Just off Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, I visited David Michie Violins, located at 1714 Locust Street. David is not only a violinist, he repairs and restores violins. He allowed me into his shop where he explains the makings of a violin and to demonstrate how math is used every day in his shop.
My name is David Mitchie. I'm a lifelong Philadelphian. I was born right outside, grew up in South Jersey. I'm a violinist. Started playing when I was the age of 7. Had dreams and aspiration to become a professional violinist from a very young age. Grew and was in high school. I was introduced to a violin shop here in Philadelphia, which I thought that was the coolest place in the world. And we start at little violinist around 3 years old and go all the way up to David Kim, who is the concertmaster of Philadelphia Orchestra, is a very dear friend and a very wonderful client. I have customers who are all over the world. I have one particular family who lives in Chennai, India, that we email back and forth.
David has quite a background in playing, repairing, and restoring violins. He's allowed me to come into his shop where he will demonstrate the math he uses every day.
With violin restoration, repairs, and making, math comes into play every single moment of the day for which we are working. Now, you say, how could that be? I'll give you some examples of that such. Okay, so this is a violin. Various parts of the violin is, this whole part is called the body. This is called the bridge. These are the strings. This is called the fingerboard. Scroll, chin rest, tailpiece. Now if you look at the bridge, positioning of the bridge is a very critical aspect for players to make sure that they can play to their best of the ability. What do you mean? So, the length of a body of a violin is 355 millimeters long. We use millimeters because violin making is basically a European tradition that has come to this country and has gone all over the world. So in Europe, the metric system is used, and that's what has been just the tradition in modern violin making and restoration. So the body is 355 millimeters long. The bridge must be 195 millimeters from the top of the body to this area right here. And this is an imaginary line that the bridge sits on. It's called a diapason. Now, in addition to this set measurement here, the length of a neck, which goes from here to here, is 130 millimeters. Those two positions must be the same. So that, when you add the two together, you will have a string length of 330 millimeters. Why is it always should be the same? Because if you're a violinist and you go from one violin to another to play, you want to make sure you can comfortably and you have that feeling that you can put the fingers down on the notes and they will always be the same place so that you can play in tune. So, now, I'm going to take a top off a violin and show you how numbers, measurements, and math is even more important for our craft. So, the top is made out of spruce. The back and ribs, which I'll get to in a minute, are made out of maple. Okay. Now, there's probably been 100 years since this top has been open. This violin has been open. Now, this piece of wood is in every single violin. This is called the bass bar, and this adds stability to the top of the instrument because these strings, which are stretched across the bridge and on top of the fingerboard, has a tremendous downward pressure, and it's generally about 44 pounds per square inch that goes across the top. Now you'd be amazed at how thin this wood is. I'm going to use a tool in our field. It's called a caliper, and it measures thicknesses. Why are thicknesses so important? Because when you play an instrument, you must think, instruments make sound. What is sound? Sound is vibrations. Wood needs to be a particular thickness for it to vibrate properly. So, we take our caliper and it moves, that demonstrates 1 millimeter right there. That demonstrates 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and 4 millimeters right there. You can see the distance. So we put the tear, and then this violin top in the middle is 3.1 millimeters thick. That's an appropriate thickness for this particular violin. Then we move our caliper down, and it decreases a little bit. Goes a little bit. Now it goes a little bit higher, which is not good. And then it goes a little bit lower, which is what we want. So we measure so that the center of the violin, where the bridge rests upon, is the thickest and most stable. Then it graduates slowly out so it gets thinner towards the edge. So the middle of the violin is generally 3 to 3.5 millimeters thick, and then we call these the pockets, generally are 2.5 millimeters thick. So we will measure this entire area using numbers, math, remember, and once we map what the thicknesses are, if areas are too thick, we will use these are called mini finger planes to remove the wood, because if the wood is too thick, it will not vibrate properly. If it doesn't vibrate properly, it will not sound proper. Okay. Now, on an earlier violin, I opened it up and I removed the bass bar. See here? Because this bass bar was not in the correct position. How do we find the proper position? By using math. So how does that work? So we take ruler and we find the center line of the instrument. So how do we do that? We take the thickness at the width and it comes to approximately 206 millimeters wide. Then what we do, we divide it in half and we put a mark in the middle. All right? So 206 is 103 divided by 2. Math. We go up to the top here. We do the exact same thing. We find the center of the instrument. And that's 168. 168 divided by 2, 84. So we put a mark right there. That's the width of the top. That's the width of the bottom. And then what we do, we then connect. This is now our center line of the instrument. After we do that, we take the half of the violin and we divide it by 7. So we said that the half is, it's 102. So I'll get my trusty calculator out. We divide it. One is 102 divided by 7 equals 14.5 millimeters. And then we use one of those. This is a measuring tool called a divider. I measure out 14.5 millimeters. I place it on the center line and I make a mark. This is where the new bass bar will be placed. I take the top divided by 2. We realized it was 84 millimeters. So we take 84. We divide it by 7. We come up with 12 millimeters. I measure 12 millimeters. I place it on our center line. I make a mark. I draw a line. Then I connect the two lines. This will be the position of the new bass bar when I am finished it. Now, then for the length of the bass bar, we now know that the length of the instrument is 355 millimeters. So we take 40 millimeters off each end of the instrument. So we measure from the edge, 40 millimeters here, and then we measure 40 millimeters here. We now connect. This is where the new bass bar will be located. And if you notice, it just clears the inside of this hole of the violin. Now these are called F-holes, and this is where the sound comes out. Okay? So when the bar is in, the bridge will sit, and that bar will be 1.5 millimeters, using math again, inside this bridge foot. The bass bar again helps stabilize the top of the instrument, and it contributes to the overall sound quality of the violin. It makes beautiful music if it's played properly, but how does it work? What are the physics involved in making this box of wood sing? So, as I mentioned earlier, what is sound? Sound is vibrations. So the more vibrations you have, the more sound you have. The higher vibrations you'll have, the higher the sound. The lower vibrations you'll have, the lower the sound. Okay, so this is one of my teaching tools. This is a violin that I actually cut down the middle to show students what it looks like inside. Don't ever do this with your violin, people. So now, what we have strings that are stretched across the top of the instrument, and these strings are either plucked or scraped with a bow, which causes it to vibrate. You see the vibrations? Now what happens with those vibrations? Those vibrations from the string will transfer through this piece of wood, which is called the bridge. Those vibrations then travel down the bridge through the top of the body and into the inside of the violin. Now the violin is about 500 years old, a little older than that, and inside here is a 500-year-old amplification chamber. Today, you go to a rock concert, you see electric guitar, they don't have these open bodies. The bodies of guitars are solid pieces of wood. What they do is they plug in an electronic or electric amplifier, which will take the vibrations of the guitarist's string vibrating just like this, and it will amplify it and send it out through the speakers. Well, they didn't have that 500 years ago. They had to create their own amplification chambers, and that's what they came up with the body of the violin. So, the string vibrates, vibrations go through the bridge, through the top, and are amplified in this body, and then they come out from the F-holes. Now, the violin does need a little bit of support in this process. Strings are stretched very tightly. The wood is relatively thin. So, on one side, we set up a stick of wood here, which is not glued in. We can take it out, and through tools we put it back in again, and that's called the sound post. That helps support the treble side of the instrument, and then this piece of wood back there is called the bass bar, which gives lateral support to the bass part of the instrument. And this is what a bass bar looks like. So, those vibrations are then amplified and they come out through these holes in the instrument. Now these holes are called F-holes. And 500 years ago, it may look like an S now, but it was actually considered to be the letter F back at that time period. And so the name has stayed where these are called the F-holes. And that's how the sound emanates from the body of the violin. I'll demonstrate. A practice violin or a mute violin. You'll notice, what's it missing? It's missing its body, which is its amplification chamber. This is, actually, if you've heard of an electric violin, this is actually its precursor. So there is no body to amplify the noise of the string. It just will have the string vibration, and that's all the noise it will make. We add our amplification chamber, we have the same strings, we have the same bridge, we get this. So now we've talked about violins, viols, and cellos, and measurements and physics, but we're going to talk another aspect in physics, and that's called friction. Friction is, I don't know the exact definition of it, but it's basically rubbing something together, which can create heat, but it also creates sound. So when I scrape the bow, which has what's called horsehair in there, across the string has to grab it. Now, this is the hair, and if you'll see, hair stretches, and it's relatively strong for what it is. So I can tighten it, and I can loosen it, and it won't break. This comes from horsetails, as evidenced by here. Now, no horses were harmed in making of this video. They don't kill the animal, they just give them a haircut or a tail cut, as far as that's concerned. If you look, if you were to put this hair under a microscope, you would see microscopic barbs on its surface. And those barbs will, I'll show you in a minute, collect rosin. Now, if you see how my hand is stretching, there's pliability in this hair. As I keep on going, it's getting wired there. That's, for something that's so small, that's quite a bit of elasticity, and that's what we use for putting the bows in. This hair is white, it's naturally white. This has its own quality of sound and its own quality of feel that violinists and violists like when they play. The darker the hair, the coarser the sound the hair will make when the instrument's being played. So with cellos and basses, you need to have more strength, you need more friction, you need more grip against the strings. And so bass players tend to like the dark hair, and cellists like the little bit yellowish hair more so than violinists. Now, so the horsehair, as I said earlier, has microscopic barbs in it. We snip some off, we put it into the head and the frog of the bow. This is anatomy of bow. This is called the head, this is called the shaft, this is called the frog, this is called the screw cap. The screw cap turns, the frog moves, which tightens the bow. We put new hair in it. Now, when we play, doesn't sound bright. So now we need to add an extra secret ingredient, and that's called rosin. Rosin is fossilized tree sap that's ground up into a powder. And there's the powder. So we take a little pinch and we rub it. And for you musicians out there, this is called rosining the bow. We start this. That creates a bass. And then this is rosin that has not been ground up, and it's sticky. We cross there. Get the dust off. Now, same hair, same bow, same violin. The stickiness of the rosin helps create friction that will causes the string to vibrate. Math is an intrinsic factor in dealing with violins. Not only is math, but physics. So when I have a customer, parent will come in, they'll have a little child, maybe 3 years old, who wants to learn how to play the violin. We can't give them an adult-sized violin because they would never be able to reach the end of the fingerboard in which to play. So we start off with what's called the 16th-size violin. Now remember, sound is vibrations. Vibrations are amplified in the chamber of the violin. The smaller the chamber, the less it will be able to amplify. So to give you an example, so that would be for a 3-year-old. Now that 3-year-old is going to grow. So probably when they reach 5 or 6, they will go into the next size violin. It will sound louder. Why does it sound louder? Because the amplification chamber is larger. It allows the vibrations to be amplified to a greater degree. So then they will move to yet another size. This will probably be when they are around 7 or 8. This is so the properties between these two instruments are basically the same. Proportionally, the measurements are the same. They're just smaller. Proportionally, the thicknesses are similar. It is just smaller instrument, smaller amplification, smaller sound. Now, I talked about lower frequencies of sound, and we have what's called the viola. Viola is very similar to the violin. So when we talked about frequency of the sounds, we have high frequency for high notes and low frequency for low notes. Now, there are instruments that have a lower frequency than violins, and one of those instruments is called a viola. Very similar, it's just bigger. So therefore, the range of frequency will be much lower than a violin. So I'll play the violin again. And now I'll demonstrate on the viola what the lower frequency of sound will be. Now it goes even lower than that with what we call the cello. They are related. This is just the big brother. The bigger the instrument, it will have a lower frequency of sound. Now there's also the granddaddy of the instruments called the double bass, which I don't have one here, but that is actually about approximately this big, and it has the lowest register of all the string instruments.
I must pause here to thank David Mitchie for taking time out of his busy schedule to explain the process of restoring a violin, explaining how the vibrations make the beautiful music that we hear, and allowing me to film. His final statement says it all.
Playing, restoring, making, we rely tremendously on mathematical principles, on mathematical measurements, on ratios, on physics to create music.
Thank you for watching the math and music video. As the credits roll, this last video is David Mitchie's son, Andrew, on the viola. I hope you enjoyed the explanations and comparisons using math concepts and that it helps you to question the math that surrounds you. If you have any math ideas you want to share with me, please send me an email. Maybe your ideas will be on the next Math Sleuth video.